Oh, I do believe it. I've just taken it off, but I mean, and I think for you it's even less necessary. Mario, just to kind of, you know Giovanna, obviously. So the scenario is, I will say a few words of introduction, and then Giovanna will have the interview with Lindsey during about 7 minutes. I will then come here again to introduce Henry, their son. They will end the Brexit, or the role of the UK in Europe. That's how they will end it. He will then make a summary just out of the interview, and then while he's playing, if you would be so kind of up to, or after a minute or two, to already stand here so that we don't lose too much time. So that as soon as he's finished, you can go up there. Here are the stairs. So then you go to sit there. Lindsey will take her place there, and then Giovanna will interview you for the time they will allocate. She will start with Brexit, also with Mario. And then learn your answer first, and then after the interview is finished, the plan is that you will then go back to your place, which is next to, yes, absolutely, and then Giovanna will from here probably just facilitate the discussion with everybody. So you just still come in whenever you want, of course, and as soon as the king comes in, we will wrap up, and then we will go to the honoring of our president, who doesn't know that. Okay, I hope to be able to confirm. Yeah. Oh, so modest. No. Yes. Yes, that's a good question, in fact. Where is he? Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you very much. We should have dinner here next time, I think. Well, after a day of doom and gloom and the existential crisis of the EU, this closing plenary is all about trying to let us find some positive energy again, about the future of Europe, about our future. That is not even an option, ladies and gentlemen, it is a necessity. As we all know, there is no alternative for the EU in a globalized world. There is no alternative but to work together and find solutions for transnational challenges. So the EU may quite need some serious surgery and good doctors, but killing the patient is not going to solve any of our problems. I'd now like to introduce you to my co-chair tonight, Giovanna Pancheri, who's a well-known Italian TV journalist who's been covering EU affairs for a long time and who took part in our European Young Leaders program in 2015. But before I do that, I'd like to show you also an old 40-second clip produced by Dutch architect and visionary Rem Koolhaas. And I was at the U2 concert recently, the famous Irish band, and Bono, the lead singer, was making a fierce plea for more Europe. And I quote him, he said, "Europe is a thought, and it should become a feeling." And with those words in mind, here's the clip that I thought would be useful to set the scene for tonight's debate.
Thank you, everybody, and also for this very inspiring short video. So we're going to start tonight talking about a little bit the effect and the social effect of the crisis and the economic crisis on specific, and we're going to start to do that with our first guest, which is Lindsey Nefesh-Clarke. She's the founder and president of the Women World Wide Web, and of course an European young leader. And but you know, also since she is a lot on digital and internet world, I would like this session to be a little bit more interactive with you. So you're going to be involved to be part of this conversation, not just at the very end, but also at the very beginning. And to start and to give a first kick to this conversation, I would like to ask to all of you if you think that the worst part of the economic crisis is behind us. Please raise your hand. It's also for the people on stage. Okay, so we have a lot of pessimistic people, I would say. The Eurosceptic will be very happy in this room right now. And indeed, exactly the economic crisis and its effects, we can consider them as maybe one of the main reasons behind the rising of the Eurosceptic movement in Europe so far. But it's also very interesting to see how much the people voting for this movement, according to the polls, sometimes they are young people. They are the first election. So I would like to start with this very easy question to you. Why this is happening and why these people are so attracting, this movement is so attracting, especially for young people?
Well, of course, the current challenges, the crises that are facing Europe, they're an ideal opportunity for Eurosceptics to level Manichaean criticisms at the EU and for populists to tap into the fears and anxieties of citizens. So yes, it's an ideal opportunity for them. But we're focusing on what's positive. And as you said, yes, young people.
But you didn't raise your hand, so you're not the optimistic one.
Well, you know, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think we've seen the end of the economic crisis, but I'm actually very, very optimistic. So they're not mutually exclusive at all. And you said, okay, about youth. Well, yes, a target are disillusioned youth. Having said that, it's one of the points I wanted to make this evening is we really have to stop talking about European youth as a lost generation and they're moody and they're depressed. That is not at all what I'm seeing every day in my work. you know, I think with everything that was discussed today, and this has been an amazing opportunity, very grateful to Friends of Europe for organizing this with people, you know, from across all sectors coming together to discuss these issues. You know, we've seen we have to be, I think it's crucial that we counter this this populist discourse and this, we cannot allow, it's dangerous, I would say, politically, socially, economically, morally, to allow these pessimistic attitudes to frame the debate. And we really have to be forcefully vocal, forcefully highlight the raison d'etre, as we saw in the short film, the values, the accomplishments, and the potential of the European Union and the European project.
No, don't worry, you know, because looking outside what you're saying, and especially what you are doing, of course, it is not just the young people that you're focusing on your research, but women. And the gender gap, it's for sure one of the main problem right now, not just in Italy. I come from a country where it's a real issue, but in general in all the European Union. There are numbers saying that if we decrease the gender gap in the EU of 50%, the GDP could increase of 6%. So this is huge. And especially I can imagine on the ICT sector, this is very true. So if you can tell us a little bit what can be done and what you are doing in this sense.
Yeah, you know, I felt very honored to be invited to participate in this panel, and you know, I was thinking before coming here, well, you know, what can I say? And I thought, but wait a second, I have so many positive things to say when it comes to the European Union. I'm called a social entrepreneur. I don't think of myself as a social entrepreneur. I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's a privilege. I founded a crowdfunding platform for the protection of girls and women's human rights and girls and women's empowerment. And we're transitioning towards crowdfunding for female social entrepreneurship. And in my work every day at a micro level, I'm seeing lots of positive trends. Now, you mentioned, for example, gender equality, and that's I get very passionate about this because it's you know, it's what I'm working on. If we look at the rise in gender equality and progress towards a more gender equal Europe, if we look at the positive transformations being brought about by digital technology and the digital economy, and arguably, and without hyperbole, we could say just those two trends are arguably two of the most important trends of the 21st century globally. And then in my position as a social entrepreneur in Europe, with all the privileges that I enjoy, we're seeing other positive trends. I'm seeing, you know, the rise in social enterprise, social business, this paradigm shift, which I find really heartening, towards shared value. So the social economy, but shared value, and by shared value, I mean in the widest sense. I mean seeing these innovative alliances, cross-sector, cross-border, between public, private, civil sector, to generate solutions to the challenges that we're facing in our economies, and then, of course, youth. Now, I now had to answer your gender question. On the gender question, let's, you know, setting aside the moral imperative, we were talking in the previous session about digital technology. So here we are in Europe, we're faced with a skills shortage of over 800,000. Since this morning, I'm going to be very wary about the statistics we use. So over 800,000, you know, a lack of 800,000 ICT professionals by 2020. And this is in a context of high youth unemployment. And I read Giles's article, so we can say that the average is rather around 9% across Europe. So, you know, a radiantly obvious solution is we'll get more girls and women into technology. And yes, it's said, you know, if we were to do that, it could represent 9 billion euros annually in increased GDP. And what's for sure, you've got me onto the gender question, is it is consistently proving to be one of the smartest, most high-yield investments. And that's across the board, from the micro to the macro level, whether we're talking about increasing business performance or increasing a nation's or a region's GDP. and that was highlighted recently at the G7 Forum for Dialogue with Women, hosted by Angela Merkel. Take any McKinsey reports on women matter and take the most recent, the power of parity, that getting more girls and women into the economy can boost growth, it can boost the economy, it can create jobs, and it can drive innovation.
I have to correct myself, you're not pessimistic at all. You're very optimistic. So, and talking also about, let's say, youth unemployment that you were tackling a little bit before in your introduction. Which are your expectations on the digital market? How much this sector could be important to fight and to tackle youth unemployment?
There's a book by the former global CEO of Havas called "Who Cares Wins: Why Good Business is Better Business," which I think should be mandatory reading, and in it he says, you know, the older generation saw giving back. Giving away and giving back as their end point, whereas the new generation sees that as their start point. I have to reiterate, we should not be referring to Europe's youth as a problem. Of course, we need, you know, the current context of high youth unemployment has to be transformed, but meanwhile, we should be really focusing, you know, we should be acknowledging that our youth, the digital natives, the millennials, Generation Y, who's asking why, and then Generation Z, they are our greatest, they're a great resource and a great asset. And they have huge potential, entrepreneurial potential, potential for innovation, potential to drive the digital transformation. Questions, for example, I talked about social business and you know, questions about sustainable, inclusive capitalism, you know, the sharing economy. These are issues that they care about. And they are not only imagining solutions to the major problems we're facing, economic, environmental, social, they're building them. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lindsey, I'm sorry, but because we have to respect timing here. And I'm sure that the millennium generation will have also an important role on the next referendum that we're going to see in UK. You are British, so I want to close our brief interview here asking to you, how do you think that social media will have an impact on this referendum? And of course, which outcome do you think there's going to be from this referendum as a British and European citizens?
Okay, I'm a European, I'm a Europhile, so of course I find the subject of the referendum and Brexit regrettable, worrying. It makes me think of a quote that's an epigraph in a book, Why Europe Matters, a quote of Tony Blair, who said, you know, Europe is a destiny we will never embrace easily, but it would be a monumental era of statesmanship to turn our back on it. And that brought to mind an African proverb, and since we started this morning traveling to Congo, a proverb on unity and community. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Social media, if we consider that 82% of youth in 2014 were connected to social networks, yes, social media will play a role. What is my opinion on the outcome? I'm not sure I'm qualified to predict what the outcome will be. Obviously, I can say what I hope it will be. And I think, as I said, we really have to defend the European Union and the European project.
Definitely optimistic. So thanks to Lindsey. I give the floor to Geert.
Yes, thank you. It's now a great privilege and an honor for me to introduce an old Corsican friend. Some of you have seen him in action yesterday. He's the co-founder and the first guitarist of the rock group The Police. He played for 70,000 people in Paris when they convened a few years ago, so it's great to have him here for a few hundred. He has a new album out, has a film about his life coming out, but above all, we're very happy to have him here. Henry, it's up to you.
Hey, here again, huh? I'll tell you, just one thing is like, this is a very strange gig, you know. I tell you, as a musician, I do get some requests. I think the strangest, probably the weirdest request I've ever had was, you know, David Cameron wanted to put the Police back together again, you know, because he wanted to do a private gig to Angela Merkel, you know. But the concept was that David Cameron would sing and play bass. I play guitar and Stuart would be on drums. So we declined. He wanted to sing that Police song, you know, we used to do called Next to You, to Angela Merkel. So it goes like this. So I'm on my own, I'll do it for you, okay? Well, I can stand it for another day. When you live so many miles away, nothing here is gonna make me stay. You took me over, baby, find a way. I sold my house, I sold my mother too, 'cause all I want is to be next to you. I rob a bank, maybe I steal a plane. You took me over, babe, I'm going insane. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. I had 1,000 girls or maybe more, but I never felt like this before. I don't know what came over me. You took me over, baby, look at me. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. So many times I used to give a sigh. I got this feeling gonna lose my mind. When all it is just a love affair. You took me over, baby, take me there. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. What can I do? All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. All I want is to be next to you. Next to you. Next to you. Thank you.
We're going to welcome now Senator Mario Monti. Professor Mario Monti doesn't need an introduction, I would say. He's the former Prime Minister of Italy,
But I
of
don't
course.
play any musical instrument, not even
That's
off
okay.
stage.
But I'm sure that you play for a long time the European game and you're still doing to do so. So as we were saying before, this is going to be an interactive session. We were closing on Brexit. We're going to start with Senator Monti talking and Professor Monti talking about Brexit. But before, I would like to know, as usual, the opinion of the audience here. How many of you think that UK will leave the European Union? Please raise your hand. Oh, that's perfect. You didn't raise your hand, so you agree with all the rest of...
to keep some expectation.
So what is going to happen? That's the first question on the British referendum, and what impact it will have on the European Union, even if at the very end the UK will stay in.
I'm not really very, very concerned about either Grexit or Brexit. I'm much more concerned about something deeper, which is there in all of our countries, at any rate, to which probably we'll come in a few seconds. At any rate, on Brexit, the UK is a pragmatist people, normally. Mr. Cameron faces a dilemma about the legacy to leave in history. Either he achieves a better functioning integration, or he leaves after him a double disintegration. The double disintegration scenario is if, for whatever reason, there is a no in the referendum. Because he recommends a no, because he recommends a yes, but is not very persuasive. So in that case, the UK does leave the European Union, but luckily enough, we do know that in that case, Scotland leaves the UK. I'm simplifying a bit. So that means a double disintegration. It may provoke some pleasure in some Brits to disintegrate the European Union, but to disintegrate the formerly united Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland will not be a great pleasure, I believe. So the alternative scenario is that finally the UK succeeds in being at the heart of Europe. There are numerous countries in Europe which, in my view, only wait for the UK to resume a leadership as to a vibrant, competitive, open market economy, structural reforms. This has always been in the British DNA. Now, if Mr. Cameron comes out with a strong request in this direction, I mentioned just the opening up of the market for services in Europe, then I think it would be very difficult for the others, even those who may not be that convinced, to say no. And we will see the unprecedented for the last several years image of the UK taking the high moral ground in Europe. And it will make a number of allies, and he will be able to sell at home that he has broadened his views. He's not just protecting the interest of the financial services of the city, but of the services, which are a great wealth to the British economy, and we will all be happy at the end.
It's an interesting scenario that you are drawing right now, but you said that you don't believe either to the Brexit. But I didn't see if you raised your hand on the previous question about the fact if the worst part of the crisis is behind us or not.
Yes, I did raise the hand because I interpreted your question as referring to the economic crisis and not to the political crisis of Europe, which has just begun, partly as a consequence of the economic crisis.
But going back to the economic crisis, so do you think that actually Greece is not going to be a problem anymore in the near future for the Eurozone?
Well, I think most important for all of us is whether Greece is going to be a problem for itself or not. And we had some glimpse of possible scenarios in the morning today in this room which indicated that it might. But I believe that by and large, the conviction showed by a very wide majority of the Greek public opinion that they do want to remain in the euro will put a very severe constraint on the policies of whatever government Greece may have. because they know that they are not a highly competitive social market economy yet, as the Lisbon Treaty wants us all to be. But in my view, instinctively, they perceive that it is only through an anchorage to the European Union and the euro that they may one day have a chance to become so. Incidentally, if I were German, I would consider the euro the most successful export product of Germany. And I held this view even before some recent Volkswagen events. Because it really transforms countries. This was the case for Italy, for example. And it's a powerful magnet for other countries which are less advanced in the progress, like in the process, like Greece.
I'm sorry, Professor, but are you saying that the Eurozone that we have right now is a German Eurozone?
Sorry?
The Eurozone that we have right now is a German Eurozone in the way in which it's structured and think it?
Of course, it was wanted most of all by France, as most Frenchmen and women, and one woman in particular, have completely forgotten. It's not Germany that wanted the euro. Germany opposed the euro initially. But the others wanted Germany not to have at the same time a reunited Germany and the strongest currency of all. So they made the gesture of asking to share one currency with the Germans. They, at the end, reluctantly agreed at the condition that it would be a currency for stability. Hence, the euro in itself is not a German product, but the policy framework around it is German. In my view, excessively German, but by and large German. And by the way, Mr. Kohl lost the elections on achieving the euro.
But it's also true that in recent times, since you were Prime Minister in Italy, some things have changed also in this Eurozone structure. We have some new instrument. I'm thinking about the OMT and thinking about also the QE that recently the ECB launched, and that today Mario Draghi announced that will be extended most probably on December. So I was wondering do you think that actually there are still some instruments missing to put the Eurozone in a secure path or not? Also thinking, of course, about political instruments like the Five Presidents report.
Well, to consider the Five Presidents report as a political policy instrument already is being forward-looking, as you are. But no, I believe monetary policy has done more than its share. By the way, it was not monetary policy. I mean, whatever it takes was manna, but not falling from heaven. It fell from long Brussels nights and the European Council of June 2012, which you followed until 4 o'clock in the morning, where the political leaders of Europe came to a very difficult but unanimously reached conclusion that there was...
But you had a role on that.
I suspect so, but that it was justified if a country was following all the prescriptions of the EU to imagine stabilization interventions. And then the president of the ECB was brave enough to pronounce a word and then to put in place the OMT. But nothing would have happened without the very virtuous, in that case, in their mutual independence, interaction of political Europe and the ECB. No, I wouldn't stretch monetary policy any further, to be honest. And I believe that there are still so many things to be done in the real economic policies of Europe, including moving away from one over-restriction of the German mindset as regards fiscal discipline. I'm all for it, but you cannot reasonably pretend that refraining, take the German government, refraining from borrowing a bit more in the markets at 0.5%, in order to make serious, well-measured, evaluated in public investments, for example, in information infrastructures, that is neglecting the interest of actual future generations. Actually, the opposite is true. And I believe that a more open treatment of public investment should be the most important amendment to an otherwise reasonable stability pact. And I would prefer to have a serious debate on that rather than hiding confession and absolution of venial sins through the not so transparent flexibility, although some of our countries, including my own, love flexibility very much.
Indeed, you're bringing me exactly where I wanted to go, because talking about fiscal policy, this is also true that flexibility now it's a part of this debate. And in the latest week, we saw that this thing was linked also to the migration crisis. There were some member states that were actually asking to have more flexibility on its fiscal policy and public expenditure, thanks to what they did for migrants. So what do you think of this idea?
The idea reflects a right perception, namely that those countries do not act just for themselves. They act widely in the broader interest or acceptance of realities on the part of the EU. But I think that now, in the very short term, maybe that's the way out. Give me some flexibility because I take more people. But that is contradictory, because if a country does something which is in the broader interest of the Union, then this poses a budgetary problem for the European Union. And today it is refugees and migrants. Tomorrow, let's hope after tomorrow, it may be war. The European Union may have to go to war. And the umbrella of NATO and the US is likely to be less and less protective. Should we, in that case, imagine again flexibility? No, I believe it is high time that the European Union considers seriously the issue of a proper budget. Member states are now saying that coping with migrants is an own function of the EU. Well, own functions require own resources and not just playing with national contributions. So the budgetary issue of the EU comes up quite strongly, I believe.
Yeah, indeed.
Which is not a majority view, but...
But we're going to the final question also, because I want to leave some space to the audience for the Q&A that I'm sure there's going to be plenty of it. And but as we were saying, as we were doing since the very beginning, the final question I would like to ask you before to the audience, do you believe that actually the European Union has still a possible political future as a union or not? Please raise your hand if you think, if you're a positive and optimistic. Lindsey, so you see the optimistic view. Senator, you're not raising your hand.
No, I don't.
The political project,
yes,
I mean, it's still there or not?
Well, there is a very important aspect of the political project, which is to stop polluting political Europe through 28 short-term national politics. The body for the expression of political Europe is already there. It is called the European Council, except that it is very disappointing to see how that is filled with politics, not with technocracy, but it is low-level, very short-term politics of the individual member states. And that is the reason, by the way, the main reason for the rise in populism is that. So when we say we need a more political Europe, which political Europe? The opportunity to have serious political debates about the politics of Europe is there. There are 28 plus 1, ladies and gentlemen, busy around that table, which is more or less this size, not much smaller, but never is there a European political discussion, in spite of the efforts of the President itself and of the European Commission. And some people say we need, in the past, we need the Kohls and the Mitterrands to come back. They will not come back, because the drift in all our domestic political systems is such that the short-termism that characterizes them kills leadership, generates followership, and generates dependence on what the people think daily. Kohl lost an election to impose the euro. Schuman, in the most important act of European Union history, I believe, just imagine that his declaration, soon to be translated into the coal and steel community, had to be submitted to a referendum 5 years after the end of the war. So, and populism is there also in the US, except that in our case, a populistic drift in the functioning of our national systems begs, for the first time, in my view, a very disconcerting question. Is democracy new style and integration still compatible? I would leave it there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if any of us here has the response, but I would like to open the floor for the Q&A session. And please remind that also Lindsey, it's here available for you. Senator Monti, you can also stay on stage with me. And don't forget to state your name and organization, and please don't be shy. So, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Zoe Konstantopoulou. I'm the former president of the Hellenic Parliament. I'm really struck by this insistence to reiterate that on the part of Mr. Monti, to reiterate that whoever disagrees with the basic European policies at this point is populist and a matter of concern for others who probably see themselves as the exclusive proprietors of Europe. Europe is not mine, is not yours, is not anybody's exclusively. Europe belongs to its people. And when there's still people suffering in Europe, and when there's generations which are admittedly lost, because we talked right before about young women and employment, 72% of unemployment in young women in Greece is no success. And it's really disturbing for me. I really wanted to share it with all of you. It's really disturbing for me to receive this reiterated response that what really needs to be preserved is governance and governments. No. What needs to be preserved is the principles of Europe. What needs to be preserved is its democratic basis. What needs to be preserved is its human rights dedication. It cannot be that Europe relinquishes its human rights tradition, its social face, just for the sake of competition and competitivity. And I heard the panelists just before quote Tony Blair, former prime minister who actively contributed to an aggressive war 12 years ago. And I would like to make another quote of Tony Benn, another British leader committed to humanism. Tony Benn said, "If we can find the money to kill people, we surely can find the money to help people." And right now, there are people in Europe being totally abandoned by the European institutions. This is a matter to discuss, not a matter to corner in order to reiterate recipes which kill the patient. Thank you.
Can I ask you, what is your question exactly? Because
Excuse me?
It's okay.
It's an important statement.
It's an important
To
statement.
which I
You
hope
are
there
asking me
will
what
be-
is my question.
The exact
It was not a question, it was an intervention.
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's okay.
Although it was not a question, would it be possible to spend a few seconds?
Of course, please.
I believe, Madam President, that we are largely in agree, you and I, on the fact that Europe is a permanent search, is to look for something. Nobody has the truth, at least certainly not me. The difference, however, is that I see the European Union, for all its limitations, and I too, in my modest capacities, have tried to change some aspects of the European Union, as an entity which brought to most of our countries something which is very valuable, particularly from the human and human rights and ethical perspective. For example, unlike you, I am convinced that the huge number of youth unemployed in Italy, and probably in other countries as well, which are a tragedy, are not the consequence of these years, of these last years of budgetary restrictions, although austerity should have been practiced in a different way, i.e. public investment, but are the consequences of many decades in which, because of the absence of the European Union and European indications on national budgetary policies, domestic politicians in most of our countries, by being convinced that they were doing the good social and ethical things, were saying yes to the requests coming up from all segments of society without raising taxes correspondingly to public spending. And who would pay for that? The future generations of Italians, of Greeks, of Spaniards, and so on. And the future generations came. And that's why I believe that it has been highly beneficial, for example, from this point of view, the respect of future generations to have the European Union, as to environment, as to, allow me, gender parity, as to consumer rights. I suspect that not even Greece, though being a very advanced country, ever produced something domestically through the force of its own political system that was comparable to what the European Union induced us, sometimes forced us to introduce in our legislations. So I respect very much your point of view. I do not coincide totally, however.
There are some other questions from the... Yeah, please, the gentleman over there.
My name is Joost van Eersel, European Economic and Social Committee. On your question, will there be a political union, I was one of the few who raised his hand. And I would like to put a question to Professor Monti. In an elegant way, he argued there is already a political union because the institution is in place. The problem is that the participants are not behaving accordingly, short-termism, etc. But that is a play of words, I'm afraid, in the end. When the euro was adopted by 1991, it was clear to everybody that we should have, at a given moment, an economic political union. If not, it would go down. By 2007, the president of the Dutch Central Bank wrote that the success of the euro was such that we even could imagine a EMU without a political economic union. Then Lehman Brothers came, and we know what happened afterwards. And now we are 8 years further, and we are still struggling. Now, what I argue with my preference for a political union is that, to use an expression of Angela Merkel, there is no alternative. In the end, there is no alternative, as Wolfgang Schäuble rightly argued when he got the Karls Prize in Aachen a few years ago. There is a well-known expression that says that those who sail for the wind without knowing where to go will never come where they want to. And that means, in my view, that although the premises are bad, and although the conditions are not put in place, we have, in the end, to strive for that political union. And that is exactly the content of the opinion we adopted in the ESC in May, last May, unanimously, with modest steps linking the institutional framework with the content of economic and social Europe. Modest steps, but definite ones. And steps towards a further institutional organization of Europe than exists today. What's your opinion about that?
I'm sorry, before President Monti can respond, I would like to invite all of you to stand up and help me to welcome His Majesty the King of the Belgians. Thank you. So, if you want to reply, just to sum up a little bit, we are having a final point and conversation about a possible and potential political European Union, if it's still a possibility, a real possibility or not. And please.
Your Majesty, I am of the same view of the last intervener, namely that it would be very important to have a political union. We know how rocky the process is going to be. All I was saying in my earlier intervention is that potentially today already we have much, much more of political union than we realize, because we have a highly powerful political potential body called the European Council, which, depending on the politics that each member sitting at the table is bringing there, can be a factor of political union or a factor of political disunion. So, although I, like you, a member of the Economic and Social Committee, would like to see political union, I think that it would be very important that the current leaders of member states could facilitate the common enterprise alongside with the President of the Commission and the President of the Parliament and the President of the Council, rather than participating to decisions which especially because of the way in which they then present them at home, some of the times contribute, I'm afraid, to the political fragmentation, not union, of our union.
Thank you very much to Senator Monti. And please, Geert.
Thank you, Senator Monti. Your Majesty, on behalf of Friends of Europe, its President, Board of Trustees, Management and Staff, it's an honor to have you with us tonight. I already mentioned U2 earlier today in a concert that I enjoyed recently in Antwerp. And I was standing next to a famous Dutch TV celebrity who was talking about the fact that the Dutch king and queen were attending an earlier U2 concert in Amsterdam. We here in Brussels are, of course, very grateful that you have put your priorities right by coming to Friends of Europe's 15th anniversary celebrations instead. As we are closing our 15th anniversary year, at a time when both the EU and the world surrounding us seem to be on fire, Europe needs more friends than ever. Constructive friends, at times critical friends, but friends of the idea of partnership and solidarity. Friends of Europe and the Europe's World Group will continue to analyze trends, to confront ideas about the challenges facing the EU and its citizens, and to put forward recommendations for a more vibrant, a more inclusive, and a more prosperous Europe for all our citizens, and fighting voter apathy, extremism, and racism. And as per the approval by the board of our 5-year strategy plan, we will indeed enlarge the scope of our initiatives and partnerships in and with member states, as well as with various regional and local players. We will expand our Young Leaders program, great to see so many of us of them here, and hope to find the funds to invest in a multilingual expansion of our successful citizens platform, Debating Europe, which I'm happy to say enjoys 1.2 million unique citizens using it in the English language version. We will therefore continue to build strong alliances and partnerships, and I urge everybody with concrete ideas or suggestions for collaboration to obviously get in touch with us. Now, 15 years have passed, and unfortunately, a number of friends have passed away in that period that we would like to kind of spend a moment on them. So I'd like to kind of ask a few moments of silence for 5 people who've played an important role in our early days, and we'd like to use this opportunity therefore to honor them. The first one is Jean-Luc Dehaene, member of our board and Prime Minister of Belgium, convinced European. The second one is Loyola de Palacio, the charming Spanish First Minister and Vice President of the European Commission. The third one is our Polish friend Bronislaw Geremek, who was instrumental in the launch of Europe's World as Solidarność Foreign Affairs Minister of Poland, as you know, and member of the European Parliament. And then we have, as the fourth person, Karel van Miert, the Belgian politician and commissioner for, amongst others, transport and competition. And the last one in the row was not formally on our board, but a trusted friend and partner, Peter Weilemann, who ran the Brussels office of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for a number of years. In the Europe's World that you have found, there's a number of testimonies of people to those 5 people at the very end of the booklet. And it's very sad, and I'd like to add a 6th person, in fact, a friend of the house, somebody who worked for Coca-Cola and was a partner of this event a few years ago, who last weekend suddenly passed away because of a heart attack, Salvatore Gabola. So we'd like to just take a few seconds to commemorate all those friends. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at the moment for which, in all honesty, His Majesty the King of the Belgians has come to join us. And that is basically to pay tribute to our President, Stevie Davignon, for his exceptional leadership in those last 15 years. He doesn't know about this, so that's why, you know. And for his outstanding role in the EU integration process. So on behalf of our board and management and staff, dear President, you stand for a whole series of values and concepts, and I'm just going to highlight 4 of them. First of all, your truly European conviction and strong leadership qualities that drive you to solve problems rather than ducking them. And in that respect, you often remind us, I think, of Nelson Mandela's famous quote, "Something is impossible until it's done." And we miss that all too often in today's European Union, I have to say. Secondly, your openness to innovation, your charm, your humor. We're therefore delighted we've been able to bring over a famous British comedian to close today's session in a few minutes. Thirdly, your capacity to put things in perspective, to explain complicated situations to your hairdresser, your taxi driver, and what have you, and your capacity to motivate people. In short, your ability to create hope in today's imperfect Europe. And last but not least, a bit more strangely, your completely irrational belief in and support for Belgian football club Anderlecht. But as a token of our appreciation, we've arranged that Tottenham will suffer at tonight's European game. So Dear Stevie, once again, on behalf of the board and the management and the staff, we'd like to now offer a small present, which will be given to you by Giles, the well-known former journalist, Financial Times, and EU columnist, with whom I've had the pleasure and privilege of creating Friends of Europe 15 years ago. The present comes also with apologies from our dear friend and board member Herman van Rompuy, who is currently abroad and couldn't be here, but who on behalf of Friends of Europe has written what I think is the perfect haiku for you. He's asked me to read it twice, as one should do apparently with haikus. A man with a pipe, a cloud full of ideas, bright light in the smoke. So I'll read it again. A man with a pipe, a cloud full of ideas, bright light in the smoke. So we've put that in a frame, and Giles will now hand it over to you. And there's a box of profiterole, as our president can never resist them. Dear President, as the President of Friends of Europe is a mandate for 15 years, you have de facto and by silent procedure accepted another term. Congratulations. And I believe now, and I now want to call on stage Henry again, who is going to play a song especially for you.
Here again. I hardly do requests, otherwise you would never stop, you know. But Geert told me it was important, and you know, I got stuck into your biography and everything you did, so it's always, let me put it differently, a privilege to do a song, to play a song to a nice human being. And that's what I'm going to try to do. This song is called Into My Arms. I don't believe in an interventionist God. But I know that you do. But if I did, I would kneel down and ask him. Not to intervene when it came down to you, not to touch a hair on your head, leave you as you are, and if he felt he had to direct you, then direct you into my arms, into my arms, oh Lord, into my arms. Into my home. I don't believe in the existence of angels. But looking at you, I wonder if it's true. But if I did, I would summon them together. And ask them each to watch over you, to each burn a candle for you, make bright and clear your path, to walk in grace and love, and guide you into my arms. Into my arms, oh Lord, into my arms, into my arms, oh Lord. But I believe in love. And I know that you do too. And I believe in some kind of path. That we can walk down, me and you. So keep your candles burning, make your journey bright and pure, that you will keep returning always and evermore into my arms, oh Lord, into my arms. Nelle mie braccia, Signore, nelle mie braccia, dans mes bras, oh Lord, into my arms. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And since you're from Corsica, let me say also grazie, because, of course, our Italian and common regions are there. And now I'm very, very pleased to introduce not just a woman, not just a comedian, but an inspiring person. Shazia, please, the stage is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm a woman. In case you didn't notice, I've done some strange gigs in my time. I've done comedy in a kebab shop, a public toilet, but this is the strangest, really, here today. Everybody looks dead. Come and make them laugh. Oh, and here comes the king. But it's very nice to be here. You were talking this afternoon about European values. I don't know what that means because I'm British. And we are very specific about who we are. And I do a lot of work in America. I go to America a lot, not to blow anything up, just for comedy. And I always do really well when I'm in America. When I'm in America, I talk like Mary Poppins is my mum and David Cameron is my dad. I really English it up, which is very confusing for the Americans because they think I'm Mexican. I have never been offered so many cleaning jobs in my whole life. I hope that no one's offended. This is called the British sense of humour. And so I went to Pakistan recently because they've got comedy there now. I don't know if you know. And I went to Pakistan. I flew on PIA, Pakistani International Airlines, or pain in the ass. There are no safety precautions on PIA. In case of emergency, you have to take your hand luggage, which is 12 suitcases, and jump. I went on a direct flight, London to Karachi. Being direct, it stopped at Islamabad, Hyderabad, Jalalabad, and Stansted. Instead of giving safety instructions on PIA, the air stewards give prayer instructions. The prayer points are here, here, and here. And at prayer times, all the Muslims, they all face Mecca. So does the pilot and the plane, which accounts for the 12-hour delay. All the air stewards, they all wear burqas. They're not Muslim. They're from Scotland. But it saves on parachutes. This is going very well. No, When I say it's going very well, it's going very well. Now, my parents left from Pakistan. They came from Pakistan to England in the 1960s. My mother, she came on a boat. My dad was driving it. But it's okay. He's progressed to minicabs now. And my mother, she actually learned to speak English by watching Jerry Springer. My dad would come home and he'd say to her, "What have you been doing all day?" She'd go, "I've been watching TV and cleaning. Do you have issues with that?" He'd go, "Where are my clothes?" She'd go, "They're on the line outside." And it got very strange, really, because then she started to talk Urdu with English words thrown in, because that's how you integrate in Britain. So she'd say things like, "मैं इस country में रहती हूँ तो वो लड़की जो है ना वो lesbian है next door." It's called integration. Now, recently, I'm very happy to be performing here for the King because I'm used to royalty. I've performed for the Queen 3 times. She invited me to Buckingham Palace, and she didn't tell me why she was inviting me. So I was very nervous about this because I didn't want it to be just me, the Queen, and Philip. Because 2 royals and a brown person never works out well. Ask Dodie. Too soon? Okay. She invited me to Buckingham Palace, and you know what? It's very strange, you know, when you are, this evening you were talking about the European Union and European values, and Theresa May, our Home Secretary, said last week that you can't integrate with mass immigration because everybody's speaking the different languages and different religions and different cultures. But you know what? You can fit in and you can not fit in anywhere. I went to meet the Queen, and it's very surreal when you meet the Queen. And I put my hand out to shake her hand, and she said, "And what do you do?" And for some reason, I got very nervous, and I started talking like that as well. She said, "And what do you do?" I said, "I'm a comedian." And I felt my Birmingham accent going up 3 social registers. You know, at one point, I actually said, "Yeah." And everybody turned round and looked at me like even we don't say "yeah." And the minute I realized this, I ended the sentence with "innit." And Prince Philip went, "Isn't it?" I said, "It is." But I didn't know what we were talking about. And you know, it's very surreal when you meet the Queen, because you know, I've grown up with this woman all my life. This woman is on the back of my money. I lick this woman's head on stamps every day. I've got friends that have snorted cocaine through this woman. And now I actually get to meet her. And there is a perception that the Queen talks like this. It's true, she really does talk like this. And when you meet these kind of people, you feel like you don't fit in, and you think, "Oh my God, what am I going to say to her?" And you know, I was thinking, when I meet the Queen, what am I going to say to her? And when she said to me, "And what do you do?" what I really wanted to say to her was, "Did you kill Diana?" I thought, wouldn't it have been funny if she'd have gone, "Yes! But keep it to yourself." But I thought, I can't. I'll never be able to drive through the Blackwall Tunnel again. Great. Now, Geert told me to come and speak to you and say, what do I think about Britain's position in the European Union? Yeah, I'm a comedian. Well, basically, we're going to stay in it. We're going to stay in it. And yeah, because I say so. So they're all going to listen to me, some brown woman in England, yes. We're going to stay in it. But I never felt more united, you know, in Britain than a couple of weeks ago when our Prime Minister had relations with a pig. I don't know if you've heard about this, but this was big news. And never were Britain more united, because there is nothing better than the British sense of humour. And, you know, how long, what was that, Geert? Are you okay? You're not nervous? Yeah? You're not going to lose your job over this, are you? He's going, oh my God, the pig. You mentioned the pig. Oh my God. I'm glad you don't know what I'm talking about. You're obviously from Greece. But I'll just say, but anyway, it's been really great. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazia. And to close this closing panel, that I hope was interesting for you as it was for me, and it was funny for you thanks to Shazia, it was for me. I would like to give the floor to the President of Friend of Europe, Etienne Davignon, for the final and closing remarks.
Well, after a song and after a sketch, there are no closing remarks. This is what I have learned, and there will be no closing remarks, except three things. The first, that I thought that Giles and Geert were good friends. To pull the trick on me that they pulled at the end of this meeting will lead to a serious conversation with them. But it was nice, it was friendly, and thank you very much. And of course I don't deserve it, and that's why I liked it much. The compliments you don't deserve are the nicest to receive. So thank you for that. Secondly, I would like to thank all the friends who participated in our meeting today. It was very interesting. It was not necessarily full of optimism, but there was a sense of action and that one had to do something about it and just not speak about it. And I think it was most interesting, and the contributions of the panelists and of all of you were very interesting. And finally, I would really like to thank the King who took the time to come and see what Friends of Europe are about, and to have a King who is also a friend of Europe is something that we deeply appreciate and are enormously grateful for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, you didn't
Oh,
finish.
over to you.
No, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank Geert and all the organization of Friends of Europe for this very interesting day that we had the opportunity to spend all together. And for the very end, we're going to have Harry again on stage. Yeah, apparently. And please, I just would like to ask you to stay in the room until when Harry will have finished his song. So also the King will have the opportunity to leave the room, and for security reasons, it's better for us to sit down whilst doing that. Thanks to everybody again, and thanks to Harry.
I was going to play. I know a Belgian song. I mean, you know, the greatest French singer is from Belgium. He's called Jacques Brel. So as the King was leaving the building, as we normally say in Las Vegas, I was going to play a Jacques Brel song, Ne me quitte pas. Ne me quitte pas. Tu peux s'oublier, tu peux s'oublier, qui s'enfuit déjà, oublier le temps des malentendus et le temps perdu, à savoir comment oublier ces heures qui tuaient parfois à coups de pourquoi le cœur du bonheur. Ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. Moi, je t'offrirai des perles de pluie venues de pays où il ne pleut pas. Je creuserai la terre jusqu'après ma mort pour couvrir ton corps d'or et de lumière. Je ferai un domaine où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi, où tu sera reine, mais ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. Je t'inventerai des mots insensés que tu comprendras. Je te raconterai l'histoire de ceux qui ont vu deux fois leur cœur s'embraser. Je te raconterai l'histoire de ce roi mort de n'avoir pas pu te rencontrer. Mais ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. On a vu souvent rejaillir le feu d'un ancien volcan qu'on croyait trop vieux. Il est, paraît-il, des terres brûlées donnant plus de blé qu'un meilleur avril. Et quand vient le soir, pour qu'un ciel flamboie, le rouge et le noir ne s'épousent-ils pas? Mais ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. Ne me quitte pas, je ne vais plus parler, je ne vais plus pleurer, je me cacherai là à te regarder danser et sourire et à t'écouter chanter puis rire. Laisse-moi devenir l'ombre de ton ombre, l'ombre de ta main, l'ombre de ton chien. Mais ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. Thank you. Merci. C'était pour le roi. J'y demanderai.